Hey everyone, welcome back to English Express, the podcast where we just talk like real people. No scripts, no perfect grammar, just two friends having a conversation. So you can listen, repeat, and start sounding more natural in English.
That's right. I'm Finn, and today we're talking about something everyone is trying to figure out. How to actually get your life together. And I say trying because, honestly, I don't think any of us ever fully does.
Oh, absolutely not. I think the goal is just to look like you have it together, even when you don't. That's the real adult skill, right?
100%. Okay, so we've got a really good episode planned. We're going to talk about morning routines, work habits, how we spend our evenings, social life, and all the little things that make up a regular day in English.
And remember, the best way to use this podcast is to shadow us. That means you listen first, and then you repeat what we say. Try to copy our rhythm, our tone, our natural speed. Don't just read the words, feel the energy.
Exactly. If you can sound like us by the end of this episode, your English is going to feel so much more natural. Okay, let's get into it.
So, Finn, let's start with mornings. What does your morning actually look like? Be honest.
Okay, honestly, my morning is a disaster. My alarm goes off at 7 and I hit snooze at least 3 times, sometimes 4. Then I'm running around trying to find my phone charger, spilling coffee on my shirt.
Every single morning.
Pretty much every morning, yeah. I have this idea in my head of what my morning should look like. Wake up at 6, go for a run, make a healthy breakfast, meditate for 20 minutes. But what actually happens is completely different.
The gap between who we think we are and who we actually are first thing in the morning is massive. I get it. I used to be terrible in the mornings too.
Used to be? So what changed?
I started putting my phone in another room at night. That was the big one. Because before, I'd lie in bed scrolling for an hour before I even thought about getting up. And then I felt tired and annoyed before the day even started.
Oh, I know that feeling. You've been in bed for 8 hours and somehow you still feel exhausted because you spent the last hour watching videos of cats failing to jump onto tables.
Exactly. Those videos are a trap. So now I put the phone in the kitchen and I have an actual alarm clock, a real one, on my bedside table. And it kind of forces me to physically get out of bed to check my messages.
That's actually a really good idea. I've heard people talk about that, but I've never actually done it.
It genuinely changed everything. Once I'm up and out of bed, I'm fine. The hardest part is just those first 5 minutes.
The first 5 minutes are brutal. Your brain is still basically offline. You're just sort of standing there in the kitchen in your pajamas, staring at the kettle.
Waiting for it to boil, yes. And then the kettle boils and somehow everything gets better.
Tea or coffee for you in the morning?
Coffee. Always coffee. Strong coffee. I'm not a person before my first cup. I've told my friends, do not try to have a serious conversation with me before I've had coffee. It won't go well.
That's fair warning. I'm a tea person, actually. I know that surprises some people. I like the ritual of it. Putting the bag in, waiting for it to brew, adding just the right amount of milk.
You've put a lot of thought into your tea.
It matters. The milk-to-tea ratio matters a lot, actually. Too much milk and it tastes like warm water. Too little and it's too strong. You have to get it right.
Okay, I respect that. I take mine with oat milk and 2 sugars, which I know is controversial in some coffee circles.
2 sugars? Really?
Yes, 2 sugars. I like sweet coffee. Judge me.
I'm not judging. I just wasn't expecting that from you. You seem like a black coffee person.
I know, everyone thinks that, but no. Oat milk and 2 sugars every single morning.
Okay, so after the coffee, what's next for you? Do you eat breakfast?
I try to. It depends on the day. On a good day, I'll make eggs. Scrambled eggs, usually, with some toast. On a busy day, it's just a banana grabbed on the way out the door. And on a really bad day, it's nothing until 11 o'clock, and then I'm starving and I eat something terrible.
Oh, yes, the 11 o'clock scramble. That's real. You skip breakfast thinking you're being efficient, and then by mid-morning you can't concentrate on anything because your brain has no fuel.
And then you make bad decisions because you're hungry. Like you decide to order a massive lunch because you're starving, and then you feel heavy and sleepy for the whole afternoon.
The hunger bad decision cycle. I know it well. I've been trying to meal prep on Sundays to avoid it, making things ahead of time so I don't have to think in the morning.
Does it actually work?
About 50% of the time. Sometimes I meal prep on Sunday and I'm really proud of myself, and then Monday comes and I'm eating the meal prep food, but by Wednesday, I'm bored of it and I'm ordering takeaway again.
Oh no, the midweek takeaway betrayal.
Every time. I convince myself I'll eat the leftovers, and then I don't. And they sit in the fridge looking sad until I throw them away.
Okay, let's talk about work. This is something a lot of people struggle with. How do you actually stay motivated to do work that needs to be done?
That's a big question. I think it depends a lot on whether you actually care about what you're doing. If you care about it, if it feels meaningful, motivation comes a lot more naturally. The problem is when you're doing something that feels pointless.
And a lot of work can feel pointless, even if it isn't. Like, the task itself might be important, but if you can't see the bigger picture, it's hard to get excited about it.
Exactly. I read something once, I can't remember where, about how the secret to motivation is clarity. Knowing exactly what you're trying to achieve and why. Once you have that, it's easier to start.
So do you set goals? Like formal goals? A 5-year plan kind of thing?
I've tried. I've made so many goal-setting spreadsheets. At one point, I had a color-coded system with quarterly reviews and everything.
That sounds very organized.
It was very organized for about 3 weeks. And then life happened and the spreadsheet sat there, judging me until I eventually deleted it.
The spreadsheet of shame. I've had many of those.
I think the problem with big, elaborate systems is that they're hard to maintain. These days, I'm more of a simple list person. 3 things I want to get done today. Just 3. Nothing more.
That's actually the idea behind a lot of productivity advice. Don't try to do everything. Just do the most important things. What's on your list today?
Today, finish a piece of writing I've been putting off for 2 weeks, reply to some emails that are embarrassingly overdue, and go for a walk. That's it.
I love that a walk is on the list. That's treating your physical well-being as a priority, not an afterthought.
Honestly, if I don't put it on the list, I won't do it. I'll just sit at my desk until 7 in the evening and then wonder why I feel tense and tired.
Oh, absolutely. Working from home changed my relationship with movement completely. When I used to commute, I was walking every day without thinking about it. Now, I have to make a deliberate effort to leave the house.
Do you work from home full time?
Mostly, yeah, a few days a week. And I love it. I love the flexibility. I love not spending 2 hours on public transport every day. But it does blur the lines between work and not work in a way that can be really unhealthy.
Because the office is right there. You never fully leave it.
Right. I'll finish what I think is my workday at 6, and then I'll just wander back to my laptop at 9 to check one thing, and then I'm working again.
The just one more thing trap. I fall into it constantly. And the thing is, it doesn't even feel like work in the moment. It feels like you're being responsible, but actually you're robbing yourself of rest.
I've started being more strict about closing my laptop at a set time and keeping it in a different room in the evening. Same principle as the phone.
You're very disciplined about physically removing things from your environment.
I've learned that I have zero willpower when things are in front of me, so I just move them. It's the laziest form of self-discipline. Make the bad choice harder to make.
That's actually brilliant. Designing your environment so that the good choices are easier, rather than relying on motivation, which comes and goes.
Exactly. Motivation is unreliable. Systems are more reliable. You can't always feel motivated, but you can set things up so that you do the right thing even when you don't feel like it.
That's very pragmatic. I like that. Although I do think there's a version of it that becomes too rigid, where you're following your system so closely that you lose spontaneity.
That's fair.
You've got to leave room to just not follow the plan sometimes. To have an unproductive Tuesday and not beat yourself up about it. Oh, I needed to hear that. I'm very good at beating myself up about unproductive days.
Yeah, a lot of people are. But one slow day doesn't ruin everything. The people who consistently make progress over time aren't the ones who are perfect every day. They're the ones who can have a bad day and then just start again the next morning.
Let's talk about evenings. What do you actually do to switch off after the work is done?
Okay, so recently I've gotten really into cooking. Not just making food because I have to eat, but actually cooking as a hobby. Like taking my time, trying new recipes, making a bit of a project out of it.
That's great. What kind of things do you make?
All sorts, really. I went through a pasta phase a few months ago, making pasta from scratch, which takes ages but is incredibly satisfying. And now I'm doing a lot of Asian cooking, trying to make things like dumplings and ramen at home.
Dumplings from scratch? That sounds very labor intensive.
It is. The first time I made them, it took about 3 hours, and they looked terrible, like little misshapen blobs. But they tasted amazing, and I was so proud of myself.
That's the thing about making something with your hands. Even when it looks imperfect, it tastes better because you made it.
Completely. And it's a really good way to unwind because it requires just enough concentration that you can't think about work, but not so much that it's stressful. Your hands are busy, your brain is focused on something simple, and at the end, you have food.
That's a beautiful description of cooking. What do you think about when you cook? Or do you listen to something?
Usually a podcast, which is ironic, I know, cooking while listening to a podcast, and here I am on a podcast. Sometimes music. Depends on my mood. If I want to think, music. If I want to feel like I'm not alone, a podcast.
I get that. I put on music when I cook too. Something upbeat. It makes even boring tasks feel more enjoyable. Like chopping vegetables for 20 minutes becomes almost meditative with the right soundtrack.
What kind of music do you listen to?
Varies a lot. Anything from jazz to pop to classical, depending on what I'm doing. When I'm cooking, usually something with a bit of energy. When I'm working, instrumental. No lyrics, because lyrics distract me and I start singing instead of concentrating.
Oh, I have that problem too. I once put on a playlist to help me concentrate and spent 40 minutes singing along to it instead.
Not exactly the productivity you were hoping for.
Not exactly, no. So now it's either silence or something without words.
Do you have other hobbies outside of cooking? Things you do to fill your time in a way that feels meaningful?
I read a lot. Well, I say a lot. I try to read a lot. I buy a lot of books. Whether I actually finish them is a different question.
The stack of unread books. Every reader has one.
Mine is genuinely a little scary. I have maybe 30 books that I've bought in the last 2 years and haven't started. But having them makes me feel better. Like the possibility of reading them is satisfying, even if I never do.
That is the most relatable thing you've said so far. I do the same thing with films. I have an enormous watch list that I'll never get through, but adding something to it feels good.
The watch list is a comfort object.
Exactly. It's like telling yourself, I'm a person with interests. I have things I intend to do. I'm cultivating a rich inner life.
Even if you spend the evening watching the same show you've already seen 3 times.
Which is also completely valid. Rewatching something comfortable is genuinely relaxing. There's no suspense, you know how it ends, your brain can just rest.
I've rewatched certain shows an embarrassing number of times. Shows I could probably quote from memory at this point. And I feel no shame about it.
Nor should you. Rest is rest, whatever form it takes. Let's talk about social life.
because I think this is something that gets harder as you get older, and people don't talk about it enough. Making friends, keeping in touch with people, finding time for the people who matter.
It really does get harder. When you're in school or university, friendships just happen because you're constantly around the same people. But once you graduate, suddenly you have to be intentional about it. You have to actually make an effort.
An effort is the word that puts people off. Because after a full day of work and all your responsibilities, making an effort to socialize can feel like just another item on the to-do list.
And sometimes, honestly, you'd rather just stay home. And that's fine sometimes. But if sometimes becomes every weekend, it starts to affect your well-being.
How do you balance that? The introvert need for quiet time versus the genuine human need for connection.
I try to think about it in terms of what I'll regret. If I skip plans, will I feel relieved or will I feel a bit guilty? If it's relief, I probably needed the rest. If it's guilt, I probably should have gone.
That's a useful instinct to develop. Trusting how you'll feel after, not just how you feel in the moment.
Because in the moment, I almost always want to cancel. I'm tired, it's cold outside, my sofa is comfortable. Every reason to stay home seems valid. But then I go, and I always feel better for it. I always come home energized rather than drained.
That's the paradox of socializing for a lot of people. You dread it, you go, and you feel great. And then next time, you forget that and you want to cancel again.
It's like exercise. Every time I'm about to go for a run, I don't want to. Every single time. But I've never once regretted a run after I finished it.
The things that are good for us are so often the things we resist the most.
Yeah, and I think friendships are the same. The relationships that matter most, the ones that make your life genuinely better, take a bit of effort to maintain. You have to send the message, make the plan, show up.
And when you do, it's always worth it. I have friends I might not see for months, but when we get together, it feels like no time has passed. Those kinds of friendships are so valuable.
The ones where you don't need to perform or explain yourself. You can just be exactly who you are and then get it.
That's quite rare, actually. A lot of adult friendships can feel a bit surface level. You're both busy, you catch up, you talk about the same few topics, and then you go home, which is fine. But the deeper ones, the ones where you can talk about the real stuff, those take time to build.
And vulnerability, which is scary. But I think if you want real friendships as an adult, you have to be willing to show the parts of yourself that aren't perfectly put together.
Which brings us back to the theme of the episode, really. Getting your life together doesn't mean being perfect. It means being honest with yourself and with the people around you.
I like that. That's a good way to put it.
Okay, let's talk about technology, because I feel like we can't talk about modern life without addressing it. Social media, phones, screens. How do you feel about all of it?
Complicated. Very complicated. I think technology is genuinely incredible. The fact that I can video call someone on the other side of the world, access any information I want in seconds, listen to any song ever recorded, that's amazing.
But
But the social media stuff it's a lot. I've had periods where I've been really sucked in. Checking every notification, comparing myself to what people are posting, refreshing my feed out of habit when I'm bored.
the mindless scroll. You pick up your phone for a reason, that reason disappears, and then 15 minutes later, you're watching a video of someone's holiday and you can't remember why you picked up the phone in the first place.
Exactly that. And you can feel it. You can feel that it's not good for you. Your brain is a bit foggy, your mood is slightly worse, but you keep doing it anyway.
I think the reason is that it's designed to be that way. These platforms spend enormous amounts of money and research on making it as hard as possible to stop.
And knowing that doesn't fully protect you from it either. You can understand exactly why something is addictive and still be addicted to it.
I've had a better relationship with it since I started treating my phone time like something that needs to be managed, not just left to chance. Like, I try not to check social media in the first hour of the morning.
What do you do instead?
Read a bit, write in my journal sometimes, make breakfast, and actually pay attention to making it rather than doing it on autopilot while looking at a screen.
There's something really nice about mornings without screens. The day feels like it belongs to you a bit longer.
Exactly. Before the world starts demanding your attention, you get a quiet bit that's just yours. I think that's worth protecting.
I want to start doing that. I genuinely reach for my phone as soon as I wake up, and I know it's a bad habit. I just haven't found anything to replace it with yet.
It doesn't have to be something productive. It can literally just be lying there for 5 minutes doing nothing, letting your brain wake up slowly before you start feeding it information.
Lying there doing nothing. I think I can manage that.
High bar, I know. But seriously, it makes a difference. Okay, before we get to the shadowing recap, let's do our quick takeaways from today. What's the one thing you'd want someone to take away from this conversation? For me, it's the environment thing. Don't rely on willpower, just make it easier to do the right thing. Move your phone. Close your laptop. Put the biscuits where you can't see them. The best habit is the one that doesn't require a decision.
I love that. Mine would be the guilt versus relief test for social situations. If you imagine saying no to plans and you'd feel guilty, go. If you'd feel relieved, it's okay to rest. Learn to trust that instinct.
Both really practical. I think that's what I love about these kinds of conversations. They're not about being perfect. They're about finding small, workable things that actually fit real life.
And being honest about the fact that most of us are figuring it out as we go. Nobody has it completely sorted. The person who looks like they have it together is just someone who's found slightly better ways of managing the chaos.
Right. We're all just slightly different levels of chaos. Some of us have just gotten better at hiding it.
And that's fine. That's human.
Okay. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who's also trying to get their life together.
Which is everyone. Share it with everyone. And now, time for your shadowing practice. This is the part of the episode where we slow down, and we're going to repeat some key phrases and expressions from today. Listen once, then repeat with us. Ready?
Let's start with some morning phrases. Repeat after me. My alarm goes off at 7.
I hit snooze at least 3 times.
I'm not a person before my first cup of coffee.
The milk to tea ratio matters a lot.
I try to make eggs on a good day.
On a really bad day, I don't eat until 11.
I have a list of 3 things I want to get done today.
Just 3. Nothing more.
I've learned that I have 0 willpower when things are in front of me.
So I just move them.
Motivation is unreliable. Systems are more reliable.
You can't always feel motivated, but you can set things up so that you do the right thing.
Making pasta from scratch takes ages, but is incredibly satisfying.
Rewatching something comfortable is genuinely relaxing.
The things that are good for us are so often the things we resist the most.
You have to send the message, make the plan,
and show up.
A lot of adult friendships can feel surface level. The deeper ones take time to build.
Getting your life together doesn't mean being perfect.
It means being honest with yourself and with the people around you.
I know that surprises some people.
That's the most relatable thing you've said so far.
I feel no shame about it.
Nor should you.
I always feel better for it.
That's quite a comforting way to think about it.
I needed to hear that.
One slow day doesn't ruin everything.
We're all just slightly different levels of chaos.
And that's fine. That's human. Hey everyone, welcome back to English Express, the podcast where two friends have completely real, natural conversations in English, so you can listen, repeat, and start sounding more fluent. I'm Lexi.
And I'm Finn. Really glad you're here with us today.
So today's topic is travel. We are going to talk about everything. Planning trips, dream destinations, the chaos of airports, food disasters in foreign countries, getting lost, language barriers, all of it. And the goal isn't just to have a fun conversation. We want you to walk away with real travel vocabulary, words and phrases that come up all the time when English speakers talk about travel.
We'll be using those words naturally throughout the conversation, so don't worry about writing them down as we go. Just listen. At the end, we'll do a slow recap of every key word so you can repeat them properly.
And as always, shadow us. First listen, just enjoy. Second listen, pick one of us, either me or Finn, and repeat what we say right after we say it. Copy the rhythm, the tone, the energy, not just the words, but the way they flow. Okay, let's get into it.
Let's go.
Finn, first question. Simple one. Are you a planner when it comes to travel, or do you just show up and figure it out?
I wing it. Completely. I am the most spontaneous traveler you will ever meet. I've booked flights the night before. I've shown up in cities with no accommodation arranged, no plan, just a bag and a rough sense of which direction the center was.
That sounds like a nightmare to me.
It sounds like a nightmare from the outside, but honestly, arriving somewhere with no itinerary is one of the most freeing feelings I've experienced. There's nothing you have to do, nothing you're behind on. You just walk out of the airport and let the city happen to you.
I understand the appeal, and I am genuinely trying to, because I am the complete opposite. I have color-coded itineraries. I book accommodation months in advance. I research every restaurant, every neighborhood, every museum before I leave home. My family laughs at the level of detail I go into.
And does all that planning actually make you more relaxed on the trip? Or does sticking to the schedule become its own kind of pressure?
Honestly, the planning itself is part of the enjoyment for me. I love sitting down with a map and working out the logistics, how to get between cities, where locals actually eat, what's worth skipping in the guidebook. By the time I board the plane, I've mentally lived a version of the trip already.
Which means the real thing is a kind of confirmation of something you've already imagined.
Exactly. And when things don't match what I imagined, which they never completely do, that's fine too. That's the interesting part.
I think what matters is knowing your own style and not fighting it. Some people need structure to relax. Others need the complete absence of structure. What absolutely doesn't work is forcing yourself into the wrong approach. If you're naturally spontaneous and you're trying to follow a rigid schedule, you're going to feel trapped. And if you need to plan and you're traveling with someone who just wants to wander, that's going to create friction.
Travel compatibility is a real thing. You can love someone as a friend and be completely incompatible travel partners. Different pace, different energy levels, different ideas of what a good day looks like.
And different budget. That's actually one of the biggest sources of travel tension between people. I've been in situations where I'm perfectly happy in a hostel, shared room, basic bathroom, a common area full of other travelers, and the person I'm with absolutely needs a private hotel room. Neither of us is wrong, but every spending decision becomes a negotiation.
Do we eat at that restaurant we walked past that looked amazing, or do we find somewhere cheaper? Do we take the taxi or work out the public transport? Do we do the guided tour or just explore on our own? When two people have different budgets, those conversations happen constantly, and they get exhausting.
Which is one of the great arguments for solo travel. When you travel alone, every decision is yours. You eat when you want, you sleep in without guilt, you spend 4 hours in a museum because you're fascinated, or you leave after 15 minutes because you're bored. No compromise needed.
There's a kind of wanderlust that solo travel feeds in a very specific way. It's not just about seeing places. It's about finding out how you function when you're completely on your own in an unfamiliar environment with no safety net.
And it builds real confidence. The first time I traveled solo, I was nervous the whole time I was packing. What if something goes wrong? What if I get lonely? What if I can't communicate? And then I arrived. And within 2 days, those worries dissolved. You figure it out. People are more capable than they give themselves credit for.
I've only done solo travel once, and it was a work trip, so it barely counts. The thing that holds me back is the loneliness aspect. Seeing something beautiful and having no one to share that moment with. Standing in front of something extraordinary and just experiencing it alone.
That feeling is real. I won't pretend it isn't. There are moments, a sunset, a view from a mountain, some ancient piece of architecture, where you feel this pull, this wish that someone you love was there beside you. But I think about it differently now. You share those moments later. You come home with stories, and the telling of it is its own version of sharing. And there's something to be said for witnessing beauty quietly, without performing a reaction for anyone else.
I hadn't thought about it like that.
Don't tell anyone I said something that thoughtful. I have a reputation to maintain.
Your secret is safe. Okay,
Destinations. Where do you actually want to go? Things still on your travel bucket list.
Japan. It's been on my list for years. The contrast between ancient and ultra-modern in the same country is extraordinary. Walking through a 1,000-year-old temple in Kyoto in the morning and being in a neon-lit street in Tokyo by evening? That range fascinates me.
Japan is on mine too. Honestly, the food culture alone would be enough. I've heard that even the food in convenience stores there is genuinely incredible. People talk about it the way people here talk about fine dining.
I've heard that too, and I completely believe it. Local cuisine is one of the biggest factors for me when choosing a destination. I'd honestly rather go somewhere with extraordinary food and average scenery than somewhere visually stunning with mediocre food.
Food is the most immediate way to understand a culture. When you eat what local people actually eat, prepared the way it's always been prepared, you're experiencing something real. Not a tourist version of the place itself.
And street food is where that's most true. Not restaurants, not places adapted for foreign tastes. The stalls and carts where locals grab lunch on a Tuesday, that's where you find the real character of a city.
I had the best meal of my life at a plastic table on a street in Vietnam. It cost almost nothing. It arrived in about 3 minutes. A bowl of local cuisine so good, I've been trying to recreate it at home ever since and failing completely every single time.
Because it had context. The environment, the sounds, the smell of the street around you, all of that becomes part of the meal. You can't separate the food from the place it belongs to.
Have you ever had a serious food disaster while traveling? Something that went badly wrong?
Yes. At a night market, I still genuinely don't know what I ate, and I spent the entire following day horizontal and regretting every decision I'd made in the previous 24 hours. Miserable in the moment, absolutely hilarious in retrospect.
And that's part of it, right? Immersing yourself in a culture means accepting that not everything is going to be comfortable. Jet lag turns you into a different species for 2 or 3 days. Things get lost in translation. Your stomach doesn't always adjust immediately. Stuff goes wrong.
Let's talk about airports, actually, because I feel like airports are their own specific kind of experience, and they deserve a mention.
Airports. Okay. So I have what I would describe as mild travel anxiety that specifically lives in airports. I arrive extremely early, like embarrassingly early. I need to check in, get through security, find my gate, sit down, and have at least 40 minutes of nothing before the flight boards, or I can't relax.
I'm the opposite. I've run for planes. I've been that person sprinting through an airport with a coffee in one hand and a passport in the other, boarding last, completely out of breath. I've never actually missed a flight, but I've come very close.
That sounds incredibly stressful.
In the moment? Absolutely. But here's the thing. I've never had a bad layover because I'm never early enough to have to sit through one.
That is one way to look at it. I, on the other hand, have had some epic layovers. 6 hours in Dubai once, 8 hours in Istanbul. And honestly, if you approach a long layover correctly, it's free extra travel. I left the airport in Istanbul, got a taxi into the city, walked around for 4 hours, ate something incredible, and got back with an hour to spare.
Now that is a good use of a layover. Most people just sit at the gate staring at their phone for 6 hours.
It requires a bit of research beforehand, making sure you have enough time to leave and return safely, knowing if you need a transit visa, checking how far the city center is from the airport, but it completely transforms what would otherwise be dead time.
Okay, let's talk about the language barrier, because this is something that comes up for almost every traveler at some point, and people have very different reactions to it.
I find it humbling. You go from being a confident, articulate person to someone who can't even ask for directions without panicking. And it gives you enormous empathy for people who move to a new country and have to function in a language that isn't theirs every single day.
I spent a week in a rural part of a country where English was genuinely no use to me at all. And the experience of trying to communicate through gestures and expressions and broken phrases gave me a deep respect for that. Language is something you take completely for granted until you don't have access to it.
And yet, people connect anyway. I've had what felt like full conversations with people using nothing but hand gestures, facial expressions, a shared willingness to try, and a lot of goodwill on both sides.
That goodwill is everything. Most people, in most places, want to help a lost, confused traveler. They find it charming. You look confused enough, and usually someone appears, takes your map, points you in the right direction.
Getting off the beaten path, actually, whether by choice or by accident, is one of my favorite things about travel. Taking a wrong turn and ending up somewhere you never would have found on purpose.
The best discoveries I've made traveling were accidents. A tiny bookshop down an alley I only found because I took the wrong exit from a metro station. A local street festival I walked straight into because I went the wrong way back to my accommodation. A viewpoint that wasn't in any guidebook that turned out to be the most scenic place on the entire trip.
That's the argument for leaving gaps in your itinerary, even if you're a planner. Don't schedule every hour. Leave room for the accidental, the unplanned, the wrong turn that turns out to be right.
And backpacking really teaches you that. When you're traveling on a small budget, hostels, overnight buses, local transport, street food, You have to be flexible because things rarely go to plan. Your bus is 2 hours late, the hostel overbooked, the market you wanted to visit is closed on Tuesdays, and nobody told you that. You adapt.
You did a lot of backpacking, didn't you?
Southeast Asia, mostly, in my mid-20s. Moving slowly on a small budget. Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia. Staying in cheap accommodation, eating local cuisine, meeting other backpackers, and occasionally traveling together for a few days before going our separate ways. It was one of the most formative periods of my life.
Do you think that kind of travel is sustainable long-term, though? There's a whole romanticism around the nomad lifestyle, working remotely, never settled anywhere, always moving. But I wonder how it feels after a year of it.
The reality is more complicated than the version you see on social media. The digital nomad lifestyle sounds incredibly free, and in many ways it is. But the costs are real. It's hard to maintain deep relationships when you're constantly in motion. You miss ordinary moments with people you love. You can start to feel rootless in a way that tips from freedom into loneliness.
For me, the ideal is somewhere in between. Enough stability to feel grounded, with regular travel built in. Using trips as punctuation marks in ordinary life, rather than running from ordinary life altogether.
And I think that's genuinely how most people experience their best travel. Not as a permanent state, but as something you return from. A break that gives you perspective on the life you have, and sends you back to it seeing things slightly differently.
That might be the thing I love most about travel. What happens when you come home? You see your own city with slightly different eyes. Things that felt enormous before you left seem smaller somehow. You have more patience, more perspective.
And you have references. This reminds me of that market in Marrakesh. This coffee is almost as good as the one I had in Naples. Your world gets bigger, even when you're sitting still.
There's also something called reverse culture shock that nobody really talks about. Coming home after a long trip and finding your own culture slightly unfamiliar for a moment. Things that are completely normal here look strange because you've been somewhere so different. Your reference points have shifted.
And it takes a few weeks to fully settle back in, which I actually think is a good sign. It means the trip changed something. You didn't just pass through somewhere. You let it affect you.
Which is ultimately what travel is for. Not collecting destinations or filling up a passport with stamps, but letting the world expand how you see things. Coming home a slightly more open, more curious version of yourself.
And maybe with a better vocabulary for talking about it in English.
On that note, let's do our vocabulary recap. We're going to go through every key travel word we use today slowly, so you can hear it clearly and repeat it. This is your shadowing moment. Listen, then say it out loud right after us.
Spontaneous. If you're spontaneous, you do things on impulse without planning ahead. I booked the flight spontaneously the night before.
Itinerary. Your itinerary is your travel plan, the list of places, times, and activities. I sent my itinerary to my family before I left.
Accommodation. Where you stay when you travel. A hotel, a hostel, an Airbnb. These are all accommodation.
Wanderlust. A strong desire to travel and see the world. I've had wanderlust since I was a teenager.
Bucket list. A list of experiences you want to have before you die. Japan has been on my bucket list for years.
Local cuisine. The traditional food of a particular place. The local cuisine was the highlight of the entire trip.
Jet lag. The exhaustion you feel after flying across multiple time zones. It took me 3 days to recover from the jet lag.
Layover. A stop in another city on the way to your final destination. We had a 6-hour layover in Dubai and explored the city.
Off the beaten path, somewhere that most tourists don't go. We found a beautiful village completely off the beaten path.
Immerse yourself. To become completely involved in something. I wanted to immerse myself in the local culture.
Backpacking. Traveling on a low budget, usually with just a backpack, moving between places frequently. I spent 3 months backpacking through Southeast Asia.
Hostel. A type of cheap accommodation where you share a room with other travelers. We stayed in a hostel to keep costs down.
Scenic. Visually beautiful, especially describing landscapes or views. We took the scenic route and it added 2 hours, but it was worth every minute.
Nomad. Someone who moves from place to place without settling. More and more people are choosing to live as digital nomads. Nomad. Someone who moves from place to place without settling. More and more people are choosing to live as digital nomads.
Culture shock. The disorientation you feel when you encounter a very different culture. The culture shock hit me harder than I expected on my first day.
Language barrier. The difficulty of communicating when two people don't share a language. The language barrier was real, but people were kind and patient.
Budget. The amount of money you plan to spend. We traveled on a tight budget, and it pushed us to find things we'd never have found otherwise. And that's 17 travel words and phrases you can use the next time you're talking about travel in English. All of them came up naturally in the conversation, so go back and listen again and notice how we used each one.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us. If this episode helped you, share it with a friend who's learning English. We're back soon with a new topic, a new conversation, and more vocabulary to add to your English. Until then, travel safely, speak confidently, and keep shadowing. See you next time. Hey everyone, welcome back to English Express, the podcast where two friends have completely real, natural conversations in English so you can listen, repeat, and start sounding more fluent. I'm Lexi.
And I'm Finn. Really glad to be here. This is actually one of my favorite topics we've done so far, so I've genuinely been looking forward to this conversation all week.
So today we are talking about relationships and friendships. Not in a therapy session kind of way, just the honest way that two people might actually talk about it over a coffee. And throughout this conversation, we're going to be using a lot of vocabulary that comes up naturally when English speakers talk about the people in their lives. Words around connection, trust, boundaries, and everything in between.
And as always, shadow us as you listen. First time through, just enjoy the conversation and let it wash over you without pressure. Second time, pick one of us, either Lexi or me, and repeat what we say right after we say it. Match the rhythm, the pace, the tone. Don't aim for perfect. Aim for natural. Your mouth needs to get used to the sounds, not just your brain.
Exactly. Okay, let's start with something I think a lot of people find surprisingly hard. Making friends as an adult. Because when you're a child, it seems completely effortless.
You're in a playground, someone has the same lunchbox as you, and suddenly you're best friends. There's no effort involved, no strategy, no awkwardness. It just happens.
It becomes genuinely difficult as an adult, and nobody really prepares you for that shift. When you're in school or university, you're constantly surrounded by people your own age, sharing the same schedule, the same stress, the same environment. Friendships form almost automatically because proximity does the work for you. You see the same people every single day without even trying.
And then that structure disappears, and you have to be intentional about it in a way that feels slightly unnatural. You can't walk up to someone at work and say, "I think we have a lot in common. Would you like to be my friend?" The social rules around making friends as an adult don't really exist in the same clear way they did when we were younger. There's no script for it.
There's a kind of vulnerability in it that doesn't come up the same way in childhood friendships. As kids, you just play together, and that becomes friendship. But as an adult, putting yourself out there and expressing that you'd like to spend more time with someone is a small act of courage. And not everyone is comfortable with that kind of exposure. The fear of being turned down or rejected, even in a friendly context, is real, and it holds people back.
I think that vulnerability is actually what separates real friendships from acquaintances, because almost everyone has plenty of acquaintances. People you're on fine terms with, people you'd say hello to, people you'd have a perfectly pleasant conversation with at a party. But that's very different from a real bond, a genuine connection that actually means something and that you genuinely miss if it disappeared from your life.
An acquaintance is someone you know. A friend is someone who knows you. And that difference is significant. It takes time, it takes shared experience, and it takes both people being willing to show something real about themselves, not just the polished, everything is fine version that most of us present to the world by default.
So, what makes a good friend, in your view? If you had to define it, what are the qualities that matter most to you personally?
Trust, without question. That's the absolute foundation of everything. If you can't trust someone, if you're always slightly uncertain about whether they're being honest with you, whether they'll keep what you've shared with them private, whether they genuinely want what's best for you, then the friendship has no solid ground underneath it. You can have a lot of fun with someone and still not really trust them, and that's a very different thing from real friendship.
I'd put empathy on that list too. The ability to genuinely try to understand what another person is feeling, not just react to the surface of what they're saying. Some people are really good at this. They listen in a way that makes you feel truly heard, like what you're saying actually matters to them. And other people, even with the best intentions, are already preparing their response before you've even finished your sentence.
Oh, I know that type. I've had conversations where I'm explaining something that genuinely matters to me, and I can see the other person nodding along, but they're not really present. And when they respond, their answer tells me they absorbed the words, but not what I was actually trying to communicate. That gap in empathy can feel really isolating. More isolating sometimes than having no one to talk to at all.
And I think reciprocity is the third quality I'd name. Friendship has to go both ways. If you're always the one reaching out, always the one making plans, always the one who remembers the details of what's going on in the other person's life, and they're not matching that effort at all, then that imbalance slowly wears you down over time. You start to feel invisible.
It creates a kind of quiet resentment that's very hard to address directly, because it doesn't feel like a fight. It just feels like a slow drift. A gradual pulling away from each other because the energy and care isn't being returned. And eventually you stop reaching out and they don't reach out either, and the friendship just quietly dissolves.
That phrase, drift apart, is such a natural way to describe how friendships can end without any particular event or argument. Just a gradual distance that grows until you realize you haven't spoken in 6 months, and somehow it doesn't feel strange anymore. It just feels like the way things have settled between you.
Sometimes that's okay. Not every friendship is meant to be permanent. Some friendships are very specific to a particular period of your life. The people you were close to at university, the colleagues you bonded with at a specific job. And when that shared context changes, the friendship naturally fades. That isn't a failure. That's just life moving forward and taking you in different directions.
I've had friendships like that, and I think the healthy way to see them is to feel genuinely grateful for what they were, rather than sad about what they're not anymore. They were real when they were happening. They mattered at the time. They just ran their natural course.
Where it gets harder is when a friendship fades and one person feels very differently about it than the other. One person assumes the friendship is still very much alive, and the other has mentally already moved on without making that clear. That mismatch can be genuinely painful for the person left behind, wondering what happened.
Or when a friendship ends because of something specific that happened, a betrayal of trust, a moment where someone didn't show up when it really mattered, something said that couldn't be taken back. Those endings are much harder to process because they carry real hurt alongside the grief of the loss.
Have you ever had to end a friendship deliberately? Consciously decided that someone was no longer good for you and pulled back from them?
Once, yeah. And it was genuinely hard because the person wasn't a bad person. They were just someone whose company consistently left me feeling depleted. Every interaction left me feeling worse, not better. And I started to notice that I felt relieved when plans with them got canceled rather than disappointed. That felt like a signal I couldn't keep ignoring.
That relief signal is really significant. Your emotional response to the prospect of spending time with someone tells you a lot about how that relationship is actually affecting your life. Not excitement, not even neutral, but consistent relief when you don't have to show up. That means something.
People sometimes use the word toxic to describe relationships like that, and I think it's a useful word, even though it gets overused. A toxic dynamic isn't necessarily about someone being deliberately cruel. It's about a relationship that consistently brings out a worse version of you, drains your energy without replenishing it, or makes you feel small or misunderstood on a regular basis.
Or it makes you feel like you have to perform a version of yourself rather than just being who you actually are. That's one of the things I value most in close friendships, the freedom to be completely authentic, to not filter yourself, to say what you actually think, to show up as the full, complicated version of yourself and trust that it'll be received with understanding rather than judgment.
Authenticity is interesting because it requires both people to create the right conditions for it. You can be the most open person in the world, but if the other person judges everything you say or makes you feel silly for having the feelings you have, you'll start self-censoring. The openness closes off. You start presenting the safe, edited version of yourself instead of the real one.
Boundaries are closely related to this. And I know it's a word that gets used constantly right now, but it refers to something genuinely important. Knowing what you're comfortable with in a relationship, what you need from it, and being able to say that without feeling like you're being demanding or difficult. It's about being honest with yourself and with the other person about your actual needs.
And having a friend who respects those limits once you've communicated them, because someone who consistently pushes past what you've said you're not comfortable with, even in small, seemingly minor ways, is communicating something about how much they value your comfort and well-being. Respecting someone's stated boundaries is a fundamental form of care.
The interesting thing about setting boundaries is that it often clarifies a relationship very quickly. When you're honest about what you need, the people who genuinely care about you adjust without making it dramatic. And the people who don't, or who push back or make you feel guilty for having needs, that response is telling you something important about whether this person is actually safe to be close to.
Let's talk about something that's changed quite a lot about how friendships work in the last decade: online connection. Because now people form genuine friendships with people they've never met in person. Communities built around shared interests where real bonds develop between people who may be in completely different countries.
And those connections can be genuinely real. What creates a bond isn't physical closeness. It's shared experience, mutual understanding, the sense that someone sees and appreciates who you actually are. Those things can happen online just as authentically as they can happen sitting across a table from each other in person. The medium is different, but the connection can be equally real.
But there are real limits to what can be communicated digitally. You lose body language, tone of voice, the shared silence that can mean more than words when you're with someone in person. And text is notoriously easy to misread. Something written without any negative intention can land in a way the writer never intended. And then you're in a misunderstanding that's harder to resolve because you're still using text to try to resolve it.
Digital communication can also give people a false sense that they're staying in touch when they're actually not connecting in any meaningful way. You see someone post something, you leave a comment or a like, you both feel like some kind of contact has been made, but you haven't actually spoken. You don't know what's really happening in their life. You know the version of it they chose to put online.
That surface engagement can actually make you less likely to reach out properly because it creates the feeling of connection without the real substance of it. You feel like you know what's going on with someone because you follow them online, but you haven't genuinely checked in on them in months.
Let's also talk about the difference between being alone and feeling lonely, because I think people use them as if they mean the same thing, but they're actually very different experiences.
Completely different. Being alone is a physical state. There's no one else around. Feeling lonely is an emotional state, a sense of disconnection and being unseen that has nothing to do with how many people are physically near you. Some of the most isolated I've felt has been in crowds, and some of my most peaceful, settled moments have been completely by myself.
I actually need a lot of alone time to feel balanced. I think that's true for a lot of people who are more introverted. It's not that they don't value connection deeply. They might value it more than anyone, but they recharge in solitude rather than in company. Being around people, even people they love, is energizing up to a point, and then it starts to become draining.
And that's genuinely hard to explain to someone who doesn't experience it that way. I have friends who are very extroverted. Being around people gives them energy. Being alone for too long makes them feel flat and restless. And to them, choosing to spend a Friday evening quietly at home when you could be out seems strange. But for someone who needs that solitude, that quiet Friday evening is exactly what they were looking forward to all week.
Understanding where you sit on that spectrum and where the people close to you sit makes friendships and relationships significantly smoother. Not taking it personally when a friend needs to cancel plans because they're feeling overstimulated. Not feeling guilty yourself for needing more space than the people around you seem to need. It's just different ways of being human.
What does a really healthy friendship feel like to you when you have one? What are the actual signs that tell you, this is a good one? This person is good for me.
You feel better after spending time with them than you did before. That sounds simple, but it's actually quite a precise test. Not just neutral, genuinely better. More yourself, more settled, sometimes more energized, sometimes more at ease, depending on what you needed from that particular interaction that day.
And you can tell them the truth, not just the convenient, positive version of what's happening in your life, but what's actually going on, including the parts that don't reflect particularly well on you. The mistakes you made, the times you fell short of your own expectations, the things you're genuinely worried about. And they receive it without immediately judging you or rushing to fix everything.
And you think of them when something good happens, not just when something goes wrong. I think we tend to reach out to close friends when we're struggling, which is right and important. But the friendships that really sustain you over time are the ones where you also want to call them when something wonderful happens, where they're one of the first people you think of when you have good news to share.
Let's talk about romantic relationships now, because so much of what we've said, trust, empathy, reciprocity, boundaries, applies there too, but with higher stakes involved.
What do you think is the single most important thing in a romantic relationship? If you had to pick one quality that determines whether it actually works over a long period of time?
Communication. Not because the other things don't matter, they absolutely do, but because so many relationship problems are really communication problems underneath everything else. Resentment that builds slowly because one person never clearly said what they needed. Distance that grows because neither person spoke honestly about what was happening between them. Conflicts that escalate because both people were defending their own position rather than genuinely trying to understand the other.
Compatibility is the one I'd choose. And I don't mean just shared interests or similar personalities. I mean deep compatibility around how two people handle difficulty together, how they make decisions under pressure, what they fundamentally believe about what a good life looks like. Two people can love each other genuinely and still not be deeply compatible in those ways. And realizing that later rather than earlier is one of the most painful experiences in adult life.
And conflict is actually where you see the truest picture of a relationship. Anyone can be warm and easy to be with when everything is going smoothly. But how two people handle genuine disagreement, whether they go completely silent, whether things escalate quickly, whether they can actually hear the other person even when they strongly disagree, that tells you everything about whether the relationship has real durability.
I've been in situations where the person I was with and I had completely different approaches to conflict. I tend to want to address things directly, talk through what happened, understand each other's perspective, move forward. And they needed significant time and space alone to process before they could talk at all. Neither approach was inherently wrong, but we didn't understand each other's patterns, so every disagreement left both of us feeling like we'd handled it badly.
Right. That's an incredibly common incompatibility that people don't think to actually discuss until they're already in the middle of something difficult. Knowing how you and your partner each handle stress and disagreement and being genuinely honest about it early sounds clinical, but saves a great deal of pain down the line.
Long-distance relationships are a particularly intense test of all of this, because suddenly communication is essentially all you have. You can't resolve a misunderstanding by sitting together and seeing each other's face and body language. Everything has to happen through calls and messages, and so much of what carries real meaning in person is completely absent when you're only communicating digitally.
And yet, the people who make long distance work often say that it forces a kind of intentionality and depth that in-person relationships can miss. You have to actually properly talk about real things because there's nothing else available to fill the space between you. You can't just sit comfortable in the same room and assume that's enough.
Let me ask you about red flags, because this is something people talk about a lot, but I'm not sure everyone is equally good at actually spotting them in real situations when they're involved emotionally.
That's true. In theory, it sounds simple. Just notice the warning signs. But when you care about someone, or you want things to work, or you've already invested time and emotion in a relationship, it becomes very easy to explain away things that you would immediately identify as a problem if a friend described them to you. We're far better at seeing other people's situations clearly than our own.
Some things I'd look out for: someone who consistently dismisses your feelings, someone who makes you feel like your needs are unreasonable or too much, someone whose words and actions don't match over time, someone who behaves very differently depending on who's watching, warm and charming in public, cold or dismissive in private.
And someone who doesn't have meaningful long-term friendships. Because the way someone maintains their friendships over time tells you a great deal about how they'll treat you when the initial excitement fades. People who are genuinely good at relationships tend to be good at all their relationships, not just the romantic ones. Their social circle tends to reflect who they really are.
Let's finish with something practical. If someone listening to this wants to actively build new friendships as an adult, really do the work of finding their people, what's your honest advice?
Show up to things consistently. Not once, consistently over time. Whether that's an interest group, a weekly class, a community event, the first time you're a stranger. The second time, you're a familiar face. By the fifth or sixth time, conversations form naturally, and the bond begins to build. You can't rush it, but you absolutely can create the right conditions for it to happen.
Repetition is the actual mechanism of friendship.
Research suggests it takes a surprisingly high number of shared hours before an acquaintance becomes a genuine friend. And those hours don't accumulate in one or two big events. They build slowly across many small, ordinary interactions. So you have to put yourself in situations where those ordinary moments can happen again and again.
And be willing to be the person who initiates, which is the uncomfortable part. Suggesting to someone you've met a few times that you'd like to meet up one-on-one can feel more exposing than it rationally needs to be. But most people are genuinely pleased when someone takes that initiative. They were often hoping someone would make the first move too. They just didn't want to be the one to do it themselves.
Except that not every potential friendship will develop into something meaningful. And that's nobody's fault. You're not going to become close with every interesting person you meet, and that's fine. Being okay with that takes a lot of the pressure off each individual interaction and makes the whole process feel much less high stakes and frightening.
And be patient. Real friendships take time. Sometimes a lot of time. Some of the deepest friendships I have started quite slowly. The connection built gradually across many small meetings, until one day I realized this person had become someone I genuinely couldn't imagine not having in my life. That's worth waiting for and being patient about.
Which is ultimately what all of this is about. Finding the people who make your life feel fuller, more honest, more supported, and then doing the consistent work of keeping those people close. Okay, vocabulary time. Let's go through every key word from today's episode slowly. Listen, then repeat out loud right after us.
Bond. A bond is a deep emotional connection built through shared experience and time. We formed a really strong bond during those months we worked on the project together.
Acquaintance. An acquaintance is someone you know but are not close to. He's not a close friend, more of an acquaintance I see occasionally.
Vulnerability. Vulnerability means being open and honest about your real feelings, even when it feels risky. Real friendship requires a certain amount of vulnerability from both people.
Reciprocal. Something reciprocal goes both ways. Both people give and receive equally. A healthy friendship is reciprocal. Both people make the effort.
Drift apart. When people drift apart, they gradually lose closeness without any specific event causing it. We were very close at university, but slowly drifted apart after graduation.
Authentic. Authentic means genuine and true to yourself. I want friendships where I can be completely authentic without filtering myself.
Toxic. A toxic relationship is one that consistently harms your well-being. It took me a long time to recognize that the dynamic had become toxic.
Empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share what another person is feeling. She has a remarkable capacity for empathy. She always seems to know how you're really feeling.
Boundaries. Boundaries are the limits you communicate in a relationship about what you are and are not comfortable with. Setting clear boundaries early saves a lot of confusion and hurt later. Compatible. Compatible means able to exist together well because your values and ways of being align. We got on well, but we weren't compatible in the deeper ways that matter.
Red flags. Red flags are warning signs that something may not be right in a relationship. Looking back honestly, there were red flags early on that I chose to ignore.
Trust. Trust is the belief that someone is honest, reliable, and genuinely has your best interests at heart. Trust is the foundation that every real relationship is built on.
Conflict. Conflict is a serious disagreement between people. How two people handle conflict tells you almost everything about the health of a relationship.
Long distance. A long-distance relationship or friendship is one where two people live far apart. Maintaining a long-distance friendship takes real intention and consistent effort from both sides.
Platonic. Platonic describes a relationship that is close and caring, but has no romantic element. They have been close friends for over 15 years. It is entirely platonic.
Social circle. Your social circle is the group of friends and acquaintances you spend time with regularly. Moving to a new city meant building an entirely new social circle from scratch.
Attachment. Attachment refers to the emotional bonds we form with others and the patterns around closeness that develop over time. Understanding your attachment style can explain a lot about how you behave in relationships.
Commitment. Commitment is the ongoing decision to invest in a relationship over time, especially when it requires real effort. Long-term friendship takes genuine commitment. It does not maintain itself.
Common ground. Common ground is the shared interests, values, or experiences that two people discover they have. Finding common ground is often what turns a stranger into someone you actually want to know.
Maintain. To maintain a relationship means to actively keep it alive and healthy through consistent care and attention over time. Good friendships do not survive on their own. You have to maintain them.
20 vocabulary words from today's episode. Go back and listen to the full conversation. Notice how every single one of those words appeared naturally, in real context, the way people actually use them. That is how real vocabulary learning works, not from memorizing definitions in isolation, but from hearing language used the way it actually lives.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. If this episode was useful to you, share it with a friend who is also learning English. We will be back soon with a brand new conversation and more language to add to your English. Until then, keep shadowing, keep listening, and keep showing up for the people who matter.
See you next time.
Hey everyone, welcome back to English Express, the podcast where two friends have real, natural conversations in English, so you can listen, repeat, and start sounding more fluent. I'm Lexi.
And I'm Finn. Today we are talking about work, careers, and ambition. What we do for a living, how we ended up doing it, and all the complicated feelings that come with trying to build a working life that actually means something. We will be using vocabulary that comes up all the time when English speakers talk about work, so pay close attention.
Shadow us as you listen. First time through, just enjoy. Second time, pick one of us and repeat what we say right after we say it. Match the rhythm and the natural flow. Okay, Finn, what did you actually want to be when you were a child?
An astronaut. Completely serious. From about age 5 to age 11, I was entirely convinced that was the plan. I had books about space, posters of planets on my wall. I knew the names of every mission. And then maths happened in secondary school, and the plan was quietly retired.
I wanted to be a writer, not a journalist, an actual novelist. I still have 40 pages of a novel on my laptop that I have not opened in 2 years. So the dream is technically still alive, just in deep hibernation.
Most people have a version of that. Something they wanted that got set aside because life went in a different direction, or because someone planted a small seed of doubt about whether it was realistic. That shift from what you dream about to what seems practical is such a universal experience.
And then suddenly you are standing at the beginning of an entire working life and supposed to know what to pursue. That word pursue implies active effort, not waiting for things to happen, but going after something with real intention. The most satisfying careers are built by people who are genuinely pursuing something, even if that thing changes over time.
Let's talk about ambition, because it gets treated in quite conflicted ways. On one hand, it is admired. We talk about ambitious people with respect. On the other hand, there is a suspicion around it, like being too ambitious means you are ruthless or that you do not value other things enough.
I think that discomfort comes from confusing ambition with selfishness. But you can be deeply ambitious and still care about your relationships, your health, the people around you. Ambition is simply wanting more from yourself. It does not have to mean wanting it at any cost.
And it does not have to be about money or status. Some of the most ambitious people I know are ambitious about becoming excellent at something they genuinely care about. Those are real ambitions too, and they look nothing like climbing a career ladder.
The obsession with climbing, with the next promotion, the next title, can become its own trap. You get the thing you were chasing, and the next thing immediately appears. You never stop to ask whether the direction you are moving in is actually where you want to go.
I had a period like that in my mid-20s, very focused on moving up quickly, being seen as capable and productive. It worked externally. I did move up, but I was exhausted and not entirely sure why I was doing it. That is a description of early-stage burnout.
Burnout is what happens when you work so hard toward a goal that you stop checking whether the goal still makes sense. The signals are there. Tiredness that sleep does not fix, a flat feeling about things that used to excite you, but most people ignore them for far too long.
Because there is a culture in a lot of workplaces that treats overworking as a badge of honor. The person who replies to emails at midnight, who never takes a sick day, that person gets spoken about with admiration, and it sends a terrible message about what genuine commitment should look like.
Work-life balance points at something genuinely important. The idea that work is part of a full life, not the thing your full life is supposed to serve. That you are more than what you produce professionally. And when the boundary between the two dissolves entirely without you choosing for it to, that is when things go wrong.
Let's talk about the way people are building working lives differently now. Freelancing is one of the big shifts. Working for yourself, building a client base, setting your own schedule. The autonomy is genuinely appealing, but the reality is more complicated. You carry all the uncertainty yourself, with no guaranteed salary and no sick pay. The freedom comes with responsibility that an employer would normally handle.
The side hustle is very common now, too. Building something alongside your main job. A small business, a creative project, something entirely yours. Sometimes it is financial, but often it is about having something that gives you what your main job cannot. A different kind of challenge, or the feeling of building something that is genuinely yours.
Networking comes up constantly in career conversations, and I think a lot of people have a complicated relationship with the word. It sounds transactional, like you are collecting useful contacts rather than meeting actual people. The most effective networking is just being genuinely curious about what others do and sharing what you know. The connections that actually lead somewhere come from real mutual interest, not strategy.
The last thing I want to touch on is the difference between a job and a vocation. A job is something you do to earn money. A vocation is something you feel called to do, where the work itself feels important, where you would still be drawn to it even if the rewards were smaller. Not many people find a vocation, and that is completely fine. But those who do experience their working life very differently.
Even if you do not find a vocation, you can find work that uses your strengths, contributes something you care about, and does not make you miserable. That is a bar most people can reach, and it leaves room for your other passions to exist outside of work, where they stay purely yours.
Your work does not have to be your entire identity. It just needs to be good enough to support the life you want to build. Okay, 8 vocabulary words from today, slowly, with a real example sentence each. Listen, then repeat right after us. Pursue. To pursue something means to actively go after it with intention and effort. She decided to pursue a career in teaching, despite the lower salary, because it felt genuinely meaningful.
Pursue. To pursue something means to actively go after it with intention and effort. She decided to pursue a career in teaching despite the lower salary because it felt genuinely meaningful.
Ambition. Ambition is a strong desire to achieve something significant. His ambition was never about status. It was about building something he was genuinely proud of.
Burnout. Burnout is a state of complete exhaustion caused by sustained overwork and stress. She did not recognize the burnout at first. She just thought she was tired and needed a holiday.
Work-life balance. Work-life balance means maintaining a healthy separation between your professional and personal life. After the promotion, his work-life balance suffered, and he had to make deliberate changes.
Freelancing. Freelancing means working independently for multiple clients rather than being employed by one company. She left her agency and started freelancing, which gave her far more control over her time.
Side hustle. A side hustle is a project or small business you build alongside your main job. His side hustle started as a hobby and eventually became his primary source of income.
Networking. Networking means building professional relationships that may be valuable to your career over time. He found networking uncomfortable at first, but came to see it as simply meeting interesting people in his field.
Vocation. A vocation is work you feel genuinely called to do, something that feels like more than just a job. For her, nursing was not just a career. It was a vocation she had felt drawn to since childhood.
Eight words that all came up naturally in today's conversation. Go back and listen again. Notice how each one was used in real context, and try to use them yourself this week.
Thank you for listening. Share this with someone who is also working on their English. We will be back soon with a new topic. Until then, keep shadowing and keep building whatever it is you are building.
See you next time.
Hey everyone, welcome back to English Express, the podcast where two friends have real, natural conversations in English so you can listen, repeat, and start sounding more fluent. I'm Lexi.
And I'm Finn. Today's topic is something that affects every single one of us: health and well-being. We will be using vocabulary that comes up naturally when English speakers talk about looking after themselves. So pay close attention to those words as they appear throughout the conversation.
And remember to shadow us. First time through, just listen and enjoy. Second time, pick one of us and repeat what we say right after we say it. Match the rhythm, the pace, the natural energy. Okay, Finn, let's start with exercise. Be honest, do you actually do it consistently?
Honestly, not as consistently as I would like. I have good periods and bad periods. When I build it into my daily routine, it works well. I go, I feel great, everything is on track. But the moment something disrupts that routine, a busy week at work, traveling, getting ill, the whole thing collapses, and I find myself starting from scratch again.
That word routine is so important when it comes to exercise. I think the people who exercise consistently are not more motivated than everyone else. They have simply built it into their life in a way that requires almost no decision making. It is already on the calendar at a fixed time. It just happens, regardless of how they feel that day.
Exactly. And the type of exercise matters far less than most people assume. The best exercise is genuinely the one you will actually do and keep doing. Walking every day for 30 years does far more for your health than an intense gym program you quit after 6 weeks because it was not enjoyable or sustainable.
I walk every morning, and it genuinely sets up my whole day, not just physically, but mentally. It clears my head in a way that nothing else does. And the research on walking is compelling. It is good for cardiovascular health, for mental health, for mood regulation, for concentration. Almost anyone can do it. It costs nothing, and you can do it for your entire life.
The problem is that most modern life is incredibly sedentary. If you have a desk job, you might spend 8 or 9 hours sitting down. Add a commute and an evening on the sofa, and your total movement for the day is almost nothing at all. And the human body is simply not designed for that level of inactivity.
Even just standing up and moving around for a few minutes every hour makes a real measurable difference. The goal of 10,000 steps a day exists for a good reason. You do not have to hit it perfectly every day, but having a number to aim for keeps you aware of how much, or how little, you are actually moving.
Let's talk about sleep, because I think it gets badly underestimated. There is almost a culture of pride around sleeping less. Like getting by on 5 hours proves how busy and dedicated you are. But the effect of poor sleep on everything, your mood, your concentration, your physical health, is dramatic and completely immediate. You feel it the next day without fail.
Honestly, I went through a period of real insomnia a couple of years ago. Lying awake for 2 or 3 hours, mind racing, watching the clock. It was exhausting in a way that made every single thing harder. And the exhaustion made the anxiety worse, which made the sleep even worse. A genuine cycle that took real effort to break.
The most effective fixes for sleep are also the most unglamorous. A consistent bedtime and wake time every single day, including weekends. A cool, dark room. No screens for at least an hour before bed. Once I stopped keeping my phone in the bedroom, my sleep improved noticeably within about a week.
Let's talk about mental health, because the conversation around it has genuinely shifted in the last decade. There is so much more openness now, between friends, in workplaces, in public, about anxiety, about struggling, about things that people used to feel they had to keep entirely to themselves.
That shift matters enormously. When people feel they cannot talk about what is going on internally, they suffer alone with things that are often very treatable. Anxiety is something a huge number of people experience. That persistent low-level worry, the physical tension in the body, the difficulty concentrating, and many of them do not even have a name for what they are feeling.
One of the most useful things you can do if you are struggling is to see a therapist. I know there is still stigma around that in many communities, but think about it this way. We go to a doctor for physical symptoms without feeling ashamed. Getting professional support for your mental and emotional life is exactly the same idea, and it genuinely works.
Mindfulness is something that has genuinely helped me during stressful periods. The core of it is simple.
paying deliberate, calm attention to the present moment, rather than being completely lost in your thoughts about the past or future. Even 10 minutes of focused breathing in the morning can shift the tone of your entire day.
Self-care is another word that gets used a great deal and sometimes misunderstood. Real self-care is not about treating yourself to something nice after a hard week. It is about consistently giving your body and mind what they actually need: sleep, movement, good food, connection with people you trust, and enough rest. The ordinary basics, done regularly. That is the real foundation of well-being.
And resilience. The ability to recover from difficult things and keep going is built through exactly those ordinary basics over time. People who seem very resilient are not people who do not feel difficulty. They are people who have developed the habits and support that allow them to move through difficulty and find their way out the other side.
Your health is the foundation that everything else in your life sits on. It deserves the attention. Let's do the vocabulary recap. 8 key words from today, spoken slowly, listen carefully, then repeat right after us.
Well-being. Well-being is your overall state of being healthy and comfortable in both body and mind. She made small daily changes and noticed a real improvement in her well-being within a few weeks.
Routine. A routine is a set of actions you repeat regularly until they become automatic. Building exercise into his routine meant he no longer had to rely on motivation to get started.
Sedentary. Sedentary means spending a large amount of time sitting and being physically inactive. A sedentary lifestyle significantly increases the risk of a wide range of long-term health problems.
Insomnia. Insomnia is the persistent inability to fall asleep or to stay asleep through the night. She tackled her insomnia by keeping a completely consistent sleep and wake schedule every day.
Anxiety. Anxiety is a persistent feeling of worry or unease that often does not have a clear or specific cause. Once he identified his triggers, he was much better equipped to manage his anxiety day to day.
Mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of paying deliberate, calm attention to the present moment without judgment. Even 5 minutes of mindfulness in the morning can meaningfully reduce the stress you carry through the day.
Self-care. Self-care refers to the consistent actions you take to maintain your physical and mental health. Real self-care is about regularly giving your body and mind what they genuinely need, not just occasional treats.
Resilience. Resilience is the capacity to recover and keep moving forward after something difficult. Resilience is not about avoiding pain. It is about developing the ability to move through it.
Eight words that came up naturally throughout today's conversation. Go back and listen again. Notice exactly how each one was used and try to use them yourself this week.
Thank you so much for listening to English Express. Share this episode with someone who is also working on their English. We will be back very soon with a new conversation and more vocabulary. Until then, keep shadowing, keep showing up, and take good care of yourselves.
See you next time.